Supposedly, on the cross, Jesus Christ said, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. Or in the Aramaic version, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you abandoned me? Should I ever be up on some cross, and you hear me saying that, stab me a few more times. As much goodness, more or less, but as much and what you expect from life is what you get. In the Jewish Bible, when the Jews say, God doesn't love us, he hates us, God gets really annoyed. He says, I love you guys. How can you? I'm so insulted. How could you think I hate you? I love you. You're my faves. And then he goes and just whacks and kills thousands of them in all kinds of creative ways. You're not commanded in the Bible, and when I say Bible, I want to clarify here that I'm referring to the Jewish Bible, and all of the Jewish Bible is included in the Christian Bible. In fact, the extra parts that make it Christianity are less than a quarter of the Bible, approximately, depending whether you include Apocrypha and which side you include them on, but about a quarter of the Bible, of the Christian Bible, is what is not considered part of the Jewish Bible. The rest is exactly the Jewish Bible. Now you know that. There's no commandment in the Bible, in this case let me refer to the Jewish Bible specifically, to believe that God loves you. Instead, you're told to love God. I guess because that's the way to do it. We are naturally a herd species. We are naturally slavish. The very first definition we have of any sort of God is Bereshis bara Elohim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. The very first verse in the Bible, the Jewish and, like I said, Christian Bible. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. He's the creator. Well, he's a creator, and you exist, right? If you're watching me, you exist. If you're unhappy, you're definitely not loving your creator. And if you are happy, you are loving your creator. You don't even have to think about these things, creator, not creator. It's just all that simple. God is ultimate emes, ultimate truth. God is a word that so many people define in so many different ways and is really indefinable, according to myself and the most respected rabbis of the Jewish tradition, because we are all encompassed within it. The word for definition in Hebrew is hagdara. Hagdara means the boundaries, the geder, to give something its definition. You can take a lump of clay and take away some pieces here and some pieces there, and eventually you've given it definition. But if you are within the lump of clay, you can't do that. And being as there is nothing outside of God, the main message of the Jewish Bible, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, doesn't say Adonai, it says Yud He Vav He, and if anyone gets triggered by my pronouncing it, just remember we don't know how to pronounce it. So I'm almost certainly not pronouncing it correctly, because Jews and lots of people get triggered by lots of things. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Wahad. Listen, Jews, Israelites, Yahweh, that guy that you assume that you need to give a name to, the one who was upset at Moses when Moses asked, what's your name? The one who never wants to give a name at any point. When Jacob is speaking with the angel, when Samson's father is speaking with the angel, he's not into this whole name-giving thing. He says, okay, fine, you're human. You need to give names to things because of your own limitations. Sure, Yahweh, which is really just a kind of joke. Originally, God says, when Moses says, what's your name that I should tell the Jews, who sent me? He says, Eyeh asher eyeh, I is what I is. I'll be what I'll be. I am the inevitable. I am it. Yehovah, Yahweh, that which will always is, past, present, future, the whole thing, the big thingamajiggy. It's essentially a nonsense term. Nonetheless, it does end up as the third of the Ten Commandments. Lo sisa eshem Yahweh Elohecha lashav ki lo yinakeh Yahweh es asher yisah shmo lashav. But when God speaks to Moses a little bit later on, the earlier version I was talking about was with the burning bush, when he first introduced himself to Moses. He says, he's a little bit, he says, your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they just called me God, Shaddai. Ushmi Yud-He Vav-He, Yahweh lo nadati lahem, was not known to them. They didn't need the smallicizing of God into a name. But in the world today, I suppose we do. So I carry that. I carry that name. As God told Moses there at the burning bush that I am the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. Shmi la'olam v'zeh zichri l'dor v'dor. That's my name forever, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's how I'll be known forevermore. And to this day, everybody knows about the Jews and judges their God based on how things are with the Jews. It's inexplicably tied. And there's not really much I can do about it. So I guess I'm carrying the name of God, like it or not. God also says, if you think that things are just happenstance, you'll see the anger of happenstance. It's important to believe that God is good. The way you do that is by loving God. V'ahavta es Yahweh Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol ma'odecha. Loving Yahweh your God with all your heart, which in those days levavcha also included mind, all your internals, knowledge, emotion. V'chol nafshecha, and with all your spirit, all your life force. V'chol ma'odecha, and with all your ma'ods. Ma'od literally means very. In other words, everything. There's no, it's poetic. With all your everything, with all your veries. In other words, it's usually translated as possessions, but it's much more than just possessions. You can't love God unless you're loving yourself, your life, you're enjoying yourself. That's how you love God, by enjoying yourself. Now, let's get a bit further here. The Chinese Jewish Christ. That's the name of this video that's going to go up. The Chinese Jewish Christ. The Bible doesn't have a lot of humor in it. When you find humor in the Bible, it's often of the kvetchy. You know the word kvetch in English? It's entered English. Whiny. Like when the Jews tell Moses, Hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim. Was there a dearth of graves in Egypt that you had to bring us out to the desert to kill us? Just bitchiness. The Talmud, though, is full of lots and lots of humor. I think today we need some humor. Bible's brilliant and beautiful, but we need some humor. Now, anybody who's watching me, if you're watching this, I don't really have a handle on communication in this manner, and therefore I leave it to you and to fate and my belief in God that the right thing will happen. But what you're supposed to be doing, if you're doing this correctly, is not sending me a message saying, hey, you're 2 minutes in and you didn't even start talking about the point of the title. Yeah? Fuck you. Then it's not for you. I apologize a little bit for the fuck you, because how could you know? You never saw me before, heard of me before. You just saw I wrote something on Twitter, which is one of the worst and weirdest things that we have in the world today. It's because you have a belief or an interest, and hopefully an enthusiasm and an optimism that what I am and what I am saying can have some benefit, is worthy of taking seriously. And you'll watch it regardless of what the fuck the title is. The title here is The Chinese Jewish Christ, in parentheses, for L. That's a specific individual. Because I don't know how to speak to this situation where I have no idea who is hearing it and when. So it's for L. And right now I'm going to set this alarm for, well, 20 minutes. And I will definitively not go over those 20 minutes. If the alarm rings, I turn it off at that moment. So let's talk about the Chinese Jewish Christ. First of all, the title came from a joke on the suffering servant. Because I'm going to attach to this, or perhaps to an additional version of this, I'll call this the short version, that's the long version, I don't know, something I tried to give over this morning. And I have a weird form of cowardice, a very odd form of cowardice. On the one hand, I have no problem being a Jew, according to the definition of most people in this world, being a Jew, being an American, according to my passport, being a rabbi, and being an unshy person who will say whatever he wants. Like if you watched the live stream, where it turns out it was my crazy brother. He's not a crazy brother, he's my lovely brother, and I love him very much. He's a wonderful brother. But it turned out to be my brother who was ringing and knocking like a maniac in this neighborhood at 11 p.m. It seemed most likely that if anybody was doing it, it was a fellow whom I had just gotten off the bus with, and I was speaking with him and his father, and we had a really good conversation until after his father got off, when he started getting really rude, and it seemed like he gave me a death threat, according to people. It seemed like he gave me a death threat exactly as he got off the stop before mine, and suddenly I come upstairs, and the bell and glass starts shaking and ringing and just like nonstop. So I turn on the live stream, and I called it just quickly. I just typed, "Don't kill me," because you got to call it something. And you see that in the first few minutes, I'm not, in the first minute or 30 seconds, as I'm walking downstairs explaining to you what's going on, I'm not afraid. I've got a knife. I figure probably he's got more than a knife or whatever else. He seems pretty adamant if it's the person. I kept my head. I still considered it 10 or less than 10% likelihood it was him, even though this has never occurred before, crazy ringing and whatever else. And I wasn't very concerned about the idea that I might die or kill at that moment. As a matter of fact, I was, I brought the video along primarily because I thought it would be cool. This guy comes to kill me and I get to kill him if by chance I should win. Be fun to watch, be fun to share. On the other hand, I have a sort of cowardice when people take me seriously. And that's why I left the world of people taking me seriously some 20 odd years ago. And right when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. And that's why this YouTube channel exists. So that if you decide that I should be better known and have a platform, ideally in public and in person, with involvement with an audience, questions and answers, and anybody can speak. If you think that I should have that, then, well, I'm doing the little that I can do by putting this up. So this morning, I wanted to explain why I have this beard, which I just fixed up a little bit, but possibly you might have seen in some earlier videos, I was neck bearding. And I'm not sure if I want to keep any part of this beard at all. But I was explaining the beard stuff, and because it related to Jesus Christ, people who dress this way usually will never say the name Jesus, even. And they have, including my father and my mother, an instant revulsion, an instant feeling of sickness and terror. They really don't like that name. So never mind speaking to the world at large over here, who knows who gets to see it. So over there you get to watch your suffering servant, the Christ. You get to watch your suffering servant, because I'll upload it. Maybe I'll speed it up 1.2 times, because otherwise there's too much pausing and thinking as I'm trying to not offend or get it exactly right or whatever the fuck. I'm saying the word fuck, and the word Yahweh, and all the other things, so that I'm not doing that here. And I'm not worried here. And that's not the way to go about, and that's not going to work, the worry shit. There are times to talk seriously, but not when you have 147 subscribers and literally probably only 10 people, 20 people actually watching the videos from beginning to end. And I don't even know who they are or what community they're from or what language they speak because anyway. So, the Tao Te Ching, that's Chinese, supposedly written by Lao Tzu, whether he was real or not. It opens up with an apology, as my videos usually do. saying, I know I'll be misunderstood, and da 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 da. I mean, there's a reason I decided to leave public life after being a boy wonder at the age of 21 and being feted around the world, speaking to thousands of people. Being a young rabbi of a synagogue, being hailed quite highly by very important people. There's a reason I left that world. But here we are. This is the apology that it opens with. The Tao Te Ching, the most important book in Taoism, the first most aboriginal book of Taoism. I went through many, many, many different texts, and these are the two favorite that I came up with that I think most accurately convey what the original was trying to convey. Firstly, this one right here actually has like a little comics on the side. This is how it begins. The way that can be articulately... I'm noticing that my time is running out. I got 12:46 left. I don't care. The way, in other words, the truth, the absolute, the instructions, which is what the word Torah means, by the way, instructions. The way that can be articulately described is not the unchanging way. The name that can be said out loud is not the unchanging name. With your mouth unopened and things left undefined, you stand at the beginning of the universe. Make definition, and you've gone on to measure all things. I fixed it slightly. Here's this book over here, which is very good. The opening. The Tao, as in the way, the instructions, because it is, after all, an ancient Chinese book of instructions, a little over 2,000 years old. The Tao that can be told is not the true Tao, is not the eternal Tao. Words are easily misunderstood and miscommunicated from person to person, certainly from generation to generation. Names that can be named are not true names. The origin of heaven and earth has no name. The mother of the myriad things has a name. Free from desire, contemplate the inner marvel. With desire, observe the outer radiance. These issue from one source but have different names. They are both a mystery. Mystery of mysteries, gateway to all mysteries. Leaving out the second part, which deals with the duality about how to go about living your life. Ultimately, the point is that asking God for his name is like, what? Ultimately, the point is that there's something within Judaism called the Torah Sheba'al Peh and the Torah Shebechsav. The Torah Shebechsav is the written Torah, that is the Jewish Bible, which, like I said, is the first 3/4 of the Christian Bible. And the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the Torah by word of mouth. But even the Torah Shebechsav, and it was considered a terrible, terrible day when the rabbis had to write and publish the Mishnah, which was considered the beginning of the official publication of Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Torah that had hitherto not been written. But the truth is, the Torah that we have was not given to Abraham. Abraham was the one that God chose. Abraham. God doesn't mention anything about giving a Torah to Abraham, or Isaac, or Jacob, or Joseph. None of that stuff comes up. God, Elohim, let's go with Elohim for the moment. The powers, which all combine into a singular. Again, that's the message in Judaism, that it's all one. There aren't competing powers. There is one truth. It's the very essence and essential bedrock of scientific knowledge. Yesoid ha-yesoid is v'amur ha-chochmas leida sheyesh sham motzui rishon. That's, for Jews who follow what I'm saying, the beginning of Maimonides' Yad HaChazaka. The bedrock is the oneness of truth. Doesn't mean that it can be understood by us, or that certainly that things can be communicated from one to the other. But the written Torah itself is a thing that doesn't show up until after the Jews are taken out of Egypt. God first starts off in the metaphor of the creation of Ha'adam, the earthling, into whom he breathes life. Of course, the world has been around for a long time before that. We're referring to the era, the moment when the creatures from the genus Homo, primarily Homo sapiens, but also there's intermixing with all kinds of other homos. All kinds of other homos. Homo erectus, how's that for homo? Homo neanderthalensis, Denisovan, Homo florensis, etc., etc. But the moment when they became human, that's the Adam story. When they started to develop a profound way to speak, a way to give over concepts in more than grunts and showing your teeth and beating your chest. When they started to desire romance, when Adam felt lonely. And when Eve decided, you know what, I'm going to end up having kids, so it's important for me to gain some knowledge of agriculture. Let me eat from this metaphorical tree of knowledge of good and evil and start feathering my nest. And then when Eve blames the snake and Adam blames Eve and all the rest, at the very, very beginning in this story of the Bible, communication is already difficult. Communication and relationships are complicated. I responded to a comment in a very recent video that is currently called, although I change these things all the time because I don't stand by anything I say, do or think at any time, even while I'm saying it, and make no promises. But at the moment, what it's called is Hitler's Birthday, Rav Elyashiv, Moshe, and me. And I let one comment through, and I responded to it at some length about the fact that human relationships and communications have gotten difficult and difficult. Much of our technology has been to try to get us to be a brain in a jar, which is what we kind of are becoming right now, as people, even when they're walking around outside, have headphones in and looking at their phones. It's always been complicated, and we're living now in a very strange era. And that comment, I think, is worth reading for people who are interested in following what I'm saying here, who are taking this seriously. So, at the end of the day, the Tao, the way, the halacha, the sharia, all mean the same thing more or less, that can be told is not the true Tao. You find, for example, in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, where oftentimes it'll say exactly contradictory things in the same sentence or in the next sentence, just to point out that everything has its time and place. Well, it's in Ecclesiastes even more clearly. L'chol yesh zman v'oz tachas hashamayim. There's a time and place for everything. It's a famous Simon and Garfunkel song, if that's what they're called. Yeah, is that what they're called? I think so. So that's the Chinese part, although if I have the moments, I don't think I do though. I'll get back to a little bit more Chinese. Maybe I'll add it on. Maybe I'll break some rules about time. We'll see. It's a brilliant book, this Tao Te Ching. And it starts off with that apology of, you're gonna misunderstand me, and you're gonna say that I'm wrong, and fuck you. That's the introduction. Luckily, within the introduction, right afterwards, it gets into explaining how, whatever, we don't have time for that. Now, the Jews, on the other hand, are the people of the book. In fact, the Bible literally means the book. The Bible is the only book that has accompanied mankind unchanged for at least 2,500 years by scholarly estimates. Some might claim the book of Daniel's a little bit later, whatever, fine then, 2,300 years. But there's nothing like it. It is the book, and the Jews are the people of the book. And I have a cousin who is a tax attorney, and I asked him, aren't you concerned? A few years ago there was some big push for tax reform, just to simplify the tax system. And he said, not at all, not at all. Every time something new is written, it gives us, it makes it less, it makes the average person less capable of doing it and gives more for us. It's why our legal system in America is full of antiquated jargon that almost nobody understands. It's why terms of service that you sign on with your apps are full of this jargon that they know nobody will read, but it covers them, etc. Because they get to interpret it, and you don't understand what they're talking about because it's generations later, and words and meanings have changed, and sentiments have changed, senses of humor have changed. The Jews are stuck. We've got not just this Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, which means the Torah, the instructions, 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, The Nevi'im means the prophets. Ksuvim means the writings. Not just stuck with that, but we've got tens of thousands of writings beyond that, not to mention that much of this is based on earlier writings from before that. The evolutionary history of the Jewish people is a separate subject that I'm not going to be able to cover in 1 minute and 40 seconds over here. But the Chinese Jewish Christ. So, like I said, it's a sort of joke, the Christ part, as in that I was the suffering servant this morning as I tried to give over this idea about why I'm wearing a beard. And I'm so concerned that Jews might think that I'm praising Jesus, and Christians might think that I'm denigrating Jesus, and I'll be misunderstood by scholars who think I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about because I'm speaking with passion and taking, etc. I can't explain that. I don't know. I'm just a human being made of flesh and blood who has to take a shit and stuff like everyone else, who has to sleep, who's living in this insane world around us. What do I know? But it's worth listening to, I think, if you'd like to. It's up to you, but I think it is worth listening to. I cover some very interesting stuff. And I guess in my last 30 seconds, I should point out that what Jesus was trying to do was to do what many of the prophets that the Jews accept have done. Jesus was trying to clarify the spirit of the law, lest people be caught up in the letter of the law and miss out on the spirit, which is what all the prophets said and what Yom Kippur we read on the Day of Atonement, the highest of high holy days. That's my alarm. What do you recommend? Here's what I recommend. 12 minutes and then an absolute stop. So, let's see what happens. There we go. If I haven't finished by that point, it's an absolute stop at that point. I'll tell you the basics of it. The basics of it. And I trust that you have the kind-heartedness enough, and the intelligence enough, and the self-concern not to be missing out on important information enough, that you'll be able to get back whatever the fuck triggers you in this triggered generation. This beard over here, which earlier had been a neck beard, I finally decided to get rid of that, and I got to make a decision on this, is part of a Jewish custom, because the great Rabbi Akiva, the greatest Pharisee of his age, the greatest of the Perushim, that's the Hebrew word, the separatists of his age, Rabbi Akiva very likely came from a father who was a follower of the Jesus movement, perhaps while Jesus was still alive. In fact, his name is Akiva ben Yosef, the son of Joseph. He seems to have come from that kind of background. I have never seen anybody else say this, but I've come across a lot of evidence for this. He became the ultimate Pharisee. Rabbi Akiva believed and said and clarified, just as Jesus did, that the Messiah is at hand. Although it seems that if Messiah means the utopian world, they were both wrong, because we don't have that utopian world just yet. Although you can take the kingdom of God into your heart and have it for yourself. But it would be nice if we all had it. Rabbi Akiva clarified, like Jesus, that the two main commandments are love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your everything, and love your neighbor as yourself. I'm so tempted to get scholastic over here, specifically within Jewish language, going from Hillel to Jesus, Rabbi Akiva, and explaining all that, or alternatively in scholastic language, but I'm speaking to I don't know who at this point, so I have to keep it simple. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students who died because Shelo Nahagu Kavod Zebazeh. They didn't honor each other enough. They didn't love each other enough. They didn't care for each other enough. And because of this, we have this period of mourning. It's supposed to be a period of celebration between Passover and Pentecost, Shavuos. But instead, for at least part of it, and for some people for pretty much all of it, it's a period of mourning, where we go out of our way to show that we're not taking care of our own bodily needs, such as by not getting haircuts or not shaving our beards, even if we're usually clean-shaven. Jesus was trying to do what the prophets did and to explain and to clarify the points. It's very clear if you read the very beginning of the book. The first two chapters of Matthew, by the way, are probably written only after most followers of Jesus were Gentiles, and it was written for them. Whereas otherwise, Jews in Jerusalem who were followers of Jesus were considered pretty much just regular Jews who followed this great teacher and tried to use his examples and his parables, his inspirations and stuff. Exactly the history of how these students died and why they died and the various revolts against Rome, I don't have time for. But like I said, I think I will append, although maybe I'll make it slightly faster, but I will append the entirety, without edits, of the hour and a half or so, I guess it'll probably come down to like an hour or 10 minutes, of my attempt to give this over and suffering through it, your suffering servant. Then fuck that suffering servant shit, for the record. That's not how this business is supposed to go. Like I said, if I'm saying Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, stab me a few more times, all right? The reason I had turned on the video this morning, the one message I wanted to get across, because I wanted to start a conversation with Christians, with serious Christians. You'll see that if you watch the full thingamajig there. But the lesson was that there is no way, it is a very great misnomer. Many people think that most Christians believe that if you say, I accept Jesus' sacrifice, I accept the lone Savior, Jesus Christ, and the blood of Christ, of the Lamb, and therefore I am saved and can sin. It doesn't matter because sinning doesn't matter. There are no laws no more. Yeah, sure, you should, and if someone really, but the truth is that even Paul, who changed Christianity radically, even Paul was clear about the fact that by their fruits you shall know them. Paul was clear about the fact that loving Jesus and getting rid of everything else, if you read the book of Galatians, getting rid of all of Judaism, even for Jews, simply loving God, and Jesus as a symbol of God, Jesus as a divine individual, or someone who was godly, not necessarily part of the Godhead, but that if you love God, you will automatically do the right thing. And therefore it is obvious that even according to, there is no reading of the New Testament except by somebody who is deliberately thick-headed. There is no reading in the New Testament that says that Hitler goes to heaven because he said at some point that he accepted Jesus. There is clear that simply if you go fanatical, all out, on loving life, loving God, loving your Savior, blah, 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 then of course you'll do the right thing. And you can tell the people who are not actually accepting this, according to the Christian doctrine, by the fact that they still go around doing terrible things. Not small things. In other words, obviously we're all human, and the large message of the Christian Bible is that small sins are just chill out about them and don't get nuts over them. Something Jews could really learn, by the way. But, ein tzaddik asher lo yechta, and al tiyeh tzaddik harbe, quotes from the Jewish Bible. There's no one who is righteous and never sinned, and also don't be too righteous. But otherwise, the idea that someone can be like downright bad, and nonetheless, because he says, I accept Jesus and takes communion or whatever, that he's saved, whatever saved means in any particular Christian denomination, that is impossible there's no fair reading, open-minded, open-hearted, honest, sincere, non-blockheaded reading of the New Testament. In other words, the Christian Bible part that is not within the Jews, that allows for that. That was the basic message I wanted to get across. And I explained a lot more things, but perhaps a bit out of order. Being as this is called the Chinese Jewish Christ, I may as well mention that there were Chinese Jews who had been separated from the rest of the world Jewry for a long time and didn't even know that there were other Jews in the world. And it's a fascinating story. In fact, I published something called Exotic Jewish History, but because of what today is called I'm against giving names, I'm with the Tao. But what we call ADHD or autism or whatever the fuck name the next generation decides and how they divide it and whatever else. My personal personality is such that I don't really have much executive function as a CEO sort of thing. That's why it's up to fate, to reality, to you, to God, whatever you want to call it, as to whether I'm ever taken seriously and listened to and can possibly do some good without suffering for my own, because I don't really want the public, but I should want the public stuff. I should definitely want the public stuff. Because after all, it's ridiculous to think that I should care so much about good for you and for other human beings and not care about good for me. Somehow that whole self-sacrificial business that Christians made into the essence of the religion and wearing the cross, Jews have continued to carry it out. And with 4 grandparents in the Holocaust, it came through pretty strong to me. But I don't intend for that. Obviously, I intend to at least gift this individual, whom I have the most control over and can sense the most of his feelings and whatever else, to gift this individual at least as much as I gift others. So, there was a Jewish community called the Tiao Chin Chow. Tiao Chin Chow means the religion that pluck the sinews. And my time here is like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip this little bit I wanted to say about how I need advice on how to publish this. Please comment on how to publish this 15-part series on exotic Jewish history. And I was going to describe to you what this series is, Exotic Jewish History. And I was going to offer to give it to you for free if you can help me upload it to the right places to upload it where I can make some money. And I was going to explain why I want the money and why I will not use the money that I would make from selling it. Nonetheless, trust me, it's very interesting. This time went out over here, those 12 minutes. I talk about all of Jewish history, out of chronological order, but comprehensible to literally everyone. Literally everyone. In fact, there was a Chinese atheist who somehow got a hold of it, who wrote to me to say, I just want to let you know that I'm a Chinese atheist who's never left China, but I speak fluent English, and I came across your series somehow, probably pirated, presumably, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's the best thing I've heard on Jewish history, and I just want to encourage you, because I see that you don't know how to sell stuff, that this is good stuff. Anyway, it really is for everybody. I talked, though, about the Jews of China, the Jews of India, the Jews of Ethiopia, etc. And the sales stuff. I'm not going to get too much into details in any of that. But again, I could definitely use your advice, and I will definitely give you a free copy. So I'll give you a free copy if you can give me good advice, if you can help me, actually. If you can do it for me, upload it, because again, the ADHD, autism, whatever you might want to call it, no executive function. Can't really be a CEO. Don't want to be a CEO. Either a prophet who occasionally emerges from a cave when there's something that he's absolutely certain he has to say, or a Führer, a Rebbe, someone who is not attacked by those who are listening to him. Someone who is attacked by outsiders perhaps, but those that take him seriously, they take him seriously. And they understand his human faults, etc. I like to be honest about all my human faults. But I do have one last thing to say, and this is not time-worthy, because this is the most... Jiao Qin Jiao. You know what it means? Those Jews were called, that's what they were called, the Jiao Qin Jiao. The religion that plucks the sinew. Basically, in the Bible, at some point, the Bible starts off, of course, with God creating the world, Adam and Eve. They have children, one of them kills the other one. A bunch of generations later, the people try to build a tower and a great city, and there was miscommunications going on, which mess everything up. After that, there's Abraham, and then we follow the story of Abraham and his son Isaac and his son Jacob, and then their 12 sons. That's the book of Genesis. In the book of Genesis, Jacob is pretty much a mama's boy. In fact, he does something that kind of is like, whoo-wee! I mean, who would become the people of God, the chosen ones of God, from among the two twin brothers born from Isaac and Rebekah, Isaac being the son of Abraham, whom God himself chose. Isaac and Rebekah had twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Well, Isaac was technically the one who inherited this blessing. God specifically told Abraham that Isaac inherits this blessing. And then thereafter, though, Isaac wanted to give it to Esau, but Rebekah, his wife, who was not specifically told by God that she is going to be the mother of the people of God, nonetheless engages in this horrific trickery to get the blessings given over to Jacob, so that his descendants would be the people of God, the chosen ones of God. Jacob, at this point, was a bit of a pussy. And yes, I'm going out of my way to say that because I don't really know the middle ground. The middle ground of being overly respectful, I don't really know how, the light ground of being overly respectful, I don't really know how to do. So I overdo it a little bit. He was a mama's boy. He was Ish Tum, a simple man. Yoshev Ahalim, he stayed indoors, stayed in his tents. Jacob was a simple fella. When his mother says, hey, your father is about to give God's blessing, God's inheritance, everything that matters over to your brother, you better engage in this sort of trickery by dressing up like your brother, because, hey, let's take advantage of your dad, he's almost blind. Engage in this trickery by dressing up in skins and whatever else and claim to be him, and that you'll receive the blessing. And Jacob says, but I'm afraid he's going to curse me, he'll figure it out. And his mama says, chill out, little boy. I can handle the curse. If he curses, yeah, don't worry, you're fine. So he does this, and he takes this blessing. And then, of course, his brother wants him dead. So his mother has him flee, and he goes to Haran, where I myself moved as well recently to live for a while. And over there, he gets taken advantage of by his soon-to-be father-in-law. You know, this is his father-in-law, who is also his uncle. People then very regularly married their first cousins. It was considered, in much of the world, it is still considered the norm today to marry your first or possibly second cousin. In Iraq, in particular, in quite a few countries, marrying your first cousin is literally the norm. There were two sisters, Rachel and Leah. And apparently Rachel was prettier, and she was also more spunky. She had attitude. Whereas Leah was a bit of a sad sack. But she was older. Jacob met Rachel first, fell in love, and wanted to marry Rachel. He gets taken advantage of by his father-in-law, who tricks him on the wedding night because brides would wear veils. And he ends up in bed with Leah. And that's what happens. Anyway, he gets taken advantage of a number of times. Finally, he decides to fight back. Finally, he grows a pair. Although, not that big a pair, because he still flees in the middle of the night from his father-in-law with his family. And then something really mysterious happens. On the other side of the Yabok River, as he's about to meet up with Esau, as Esau is coming against him with 400 soldiers, as he's about to meet up with Esau, he moves his family, divides them into two parts, and he has a whole system set up of trying to appease his brother by giving him all kinds of gifts. And then when he's all alone on the other side of the river, in Jordan, he wrestles with this dude. It's the oddest sort of little story that doesn't really, it's one of those little stories in the Bible that kind of come out of nowhere. He wrestles with this dude. Obviously, Jews have been writing a lot of books since, as have Christians and other people, so you can read a lot about different opinions about this. But he wrestles with this dude until the morning. And then the fellow says, hey, morning's coming, I gotta go. Let me go. Because they're evenly fought. They're in the clench. They're hugging. Jacob says, what's your name? And he says something like, what can you, how can you, what are you asking? My name is not something that can be comprehended. I don't have a name. Some Jewish sources say that he's the official angel who's supposed to help Esau, and it's a spiritual fight or a physical fight. It's not clear at all. But then the fellow asks Jacob, what's your name? And Jacob says, my name is Yaakov. And he says, no, your name won't be Yaakov anymore. It'll be Yisrael. He who can wrestle with gods, in other words, great divine powers, things above human, physical, blah, blah, blahs, and with people, and still prevail. He needed to go through whatever the heck that test was. He went through something and he prevailed. And he was given the name Yisrael, Israel, which is today the name of the Jewish state. And right now, as it's getting dark, the Jews today define time beginning with the evening. In other words, every Sabbath and festival and holiday begins the evening and then goes until the next evening, rather than from the morning. Today is Yom HaAtzmaut. Today is Independence Day for Israel, 75 years. We're still called Israel. Later on, God ratifies that name, Israel. Yeah, you had to learn to stick up for yourself. You had to learn to stop being an Ishtam Yoshev Aholim, a simple dude, a mama's boy who's afraid of things. You had to go through some difficulties and be able to overconquer them before it could actually be ratified that you will be the father of the chosen people of God. The Chinese Jews, who were called the Jiao Jin Jiao. Jiao Jin Jiao means the group that plucks the sinew, because the way that story ends with Jacob and the angel, doesn't say angel. He met a dude, he met a guy. Appears quite clearly that this guy is someone who is in some manner superior to their usual physicality. So angel works too, whatever that means. And it's at that point that it's confirmed that he's the father of the Jewish people. But before he lets Jacob go, he hits him in the thigh. And after that, Jacob had a limp. And the Bible has an addendum there, because the truth is that the Bible gives no indication. I'm not saying, but most, religious, Orthodox, Jewish, and most fundamentalist Christians believe that the Bible, and certainly the first 5 books of Moses, let's say, were written by Moses letter for letter. The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, give no indication of that whatsoever. They give every opposite indication. Moses is a character within it. Moses is discussed. And there are obvious things that are put in later on that, like over here, for example, says Al-Kain, and therefore, until this very day, Jews still don't eat the Gid Hanosha, the sciatic nerve, the area around a certain part of the animal. And in China, where the religion, where the practice, where the culture was so different, but they knew about Muslims, because there were a lot of Muslims in this area. We're talking around Kaifeng, the capital of the Henan province, I believe. They called the Jews the sect that plucks the sinews, because that was really, really weird to them. They understood the idea of not eating pork, because Muslims didn't eat pork, and this little small group, apparently they also threw away a really large part of the animal. And that's where it stems from, that story from Jacob. Now, exactly what that means, this spiritual story that's obtuse, obscure, unclear, somehow turning into the physical thing. Nonetheless, the Jews in China, cut off from the rest of the world Jewry, very few of them left. We're talking in the 1600s. Were called the Jiao Jin Jiao, the sect that plucks the sinew, because they continued to keep even this very, very early story in Genesis. Before, as I started to mention before, most of the Torah was not meant to be written to given. It was just God's attempt again. God attempted first with the creation of Adam, then after the flood with Noah, and then with Abraham, with then taking the Jews out of slavery after 430 years, as the Bible phrases it. And that's when the Torah is given. That's when all these 613 commandments, as they're colloquially known, were given, and the 5 books of Moses and all the laws. Very, 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 very few laws in the Torah come from before that. Very, very few. And this one, not to eat from the sciatic nerve, the area on the sciatic nerve, is number 3, I think. It's around there. I'm tempted to say number 2, but no, of course not. 2 would be bris. Anyways, the circumcision. In any case, although circumcision technically was blah blah, sorry, I'm not speaking to that audience. I want to tell you something very personal about myself. This has been approximately 13 years since I accepted, since I looked into the barrel of a gun, of an Uzi, in the desert, and was about to die, and had that experience about what it's like in your last moments before you die. Like I said, I have a weird form of cowardice. It's kind of, I don't want to be misunderstood intellectually or something like that, but when it comes to physical bravery, I don't really have any cowardice. In fact, perhaps even foolhardiness, but I don't see it that way. God is on my side. God has always been on my side. Reality has been on my side. I have been on my side. I've been fine. But I read in an old guidebook from the 1800s that there was a palace, an Umayyad early Muslim palace from around the year 700. That was a winter palace deep, deep, deep in the Jordanian desert bordering on Saudi Arabia. I researched and found no mention of it beyond that book. I don't know if anyone's been there since then. But being a curious fella and having been in Jordan at the time, I figured I'm going to give it a go. Lacking executive function, I didn't bother to switch in my regular vehicle for a massive 4-wheel drive vehicle to go where there are no roads for so many years, since maybe forever, and it's just desert rocks and stones and whatnot. And I started driving out there, and that was magnificent. Something very odd was that for some reason, here in New York, there are parts of this house in New York City where I don't get internet reception. If you watch, like I said, the first few minutes of that video called Don't Kill Me, the live video, you'll see how bad the audio visual is at the most potentially dramatic moments in the very beginning. Because I'm 3 stories down. And yet, thanks to, I guess, the Mossad and the CIA or whatever, there's perfectly clear internet reception over that entire desert. Driving a crappy regular car, not a crappy car, but a regular rental car, I was only able to go tops like 15 miles an hour. I mean, tops 15 miles an hour. And in the hopefully general direction of where I was thinking that palace might be. And it turned dark because that's what happens after a few hours when you're trying to get a couple of 100 miles at 10 miles an hour. And I took out my phone, called my friend Steve, and we're on the phone when suddenly a Range Rover pulls up, which was pretty odd. There are Bedouins out in that area who still wander from place to place and whatever, but this fellow seemed to be a Bedouin who was involved in drug smuggling. Seems to be that what he was doing was smuggling drugs from Eilat, the southern edge of Israel, where, they've been pretty, we're talking, this was 13 years ago, that's what it was. Where they're pretty easygoing on drugs, and then getting it across the water to Akiva, closest port there to Israel, and then getting it into Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has gotten a lot more chillax than the last 13 years. 13 years ago, if you are caught with the slightest bit of drugs in Saudi Arabia, they take you into a stadium, fill the stadium with tens of thousands of onlookers, that everyone will see and hear and fear and not do this again. And they cut off body parts, usually your head for drugs. He was not expecting me, this dude, because nobody goes there. Like I said, I have found no reference to this palace. I'm sure that it exists. I haven't read every book in existence, but I haven't found no reference since that book from the late 1800s. This dude was quite confused. Bear in mind that Jordan is very much a place where you marry your first cousin kind of place. And in Jordan, it's a very tribal place. And if you're from one tribe, you do not go to the area of another tribe, depending. It's a complicated situation I'm not going to get into the details of. But suffice it to say that my general optimism, which has borne fruit, my general optimism has borne me out. It's shown that the world and reality, God, whatever you will call it, is good, is loving, doesn't bother me, really. I just, I come out and I say, hey, whenever something happened in Jordan or anywhere else, I would say, hey, what's going on? How are you? Hi, I'm blah, 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 and everything works out. No problems. This time, on the other side of the Yabok River, it didn't work. I guess that someone who is engaging in smuggling drugs from Israel to Saudi Arabia and never encounters anybody, when he encounters someone with very bad Arabic, regardless of how pleasant he is, and regardless of the fact that I said I was a Muslim, and I said the Shahada for him and all that, and I was friendly, and I closed my door to show that I trust him, my car door and all that, and went out to go talk to him and shake his hand. Regardless of all that, turns out there might be some people in the world who, at certain circumstances, there's really not much you can do. He wasn't lying in wait for me, because again, he hasn't come across somebody else there ever in his life, probably. And if he has, it might be, I don't know, some cement truck carrying stuff to Saudi Arabia. I don't, but this was not, he had no idea what to make of me. So he sticks an Uzi, a submachine gun, out the window directly at my belly. And bear in mind, like I said, I closed my car door and I had walked over to his Range Rover. The edge of the Uzi is about 4 feet from my belly. Pretty sure that could do some damage. And he says, "Money!" And I still responded, this is after I already did the whole, hey, how you doing, man? How's it going? After I did, to the degree that I could in Arabic, which had worked every other time. Because people are good. People like each other. They're just afraid of us. They're just afraid of everyone. Once you show that they have nothing to be afraid of you, for the most part, people are cool. This was not that situation. So I said, "Mafi money. I don't have money." And he put the entire gun right at my belly. Money. So because I take a certain kind of pride, which might be wrong, I'm not sure, but I take a certain kind of pride in doubt, in even doubting myself. And I know how much people aggrandize their stories and say how interesting, and they boost themselves up. And for whatever reason, good or bad or indifferent, I tend to do the opposite and to doubt myself. I can tell you my exact thoughts. They probably all took place within a split second. I've learned from future experiences that when you encounter life and death moments, time slows down. And things that you normally wouldn't notice, you're noticing every little thing. So probably just within the space of 1 second, these were the thoughts. Wait, I'm gonna die here? Because bear in mind, he didn't realize it yet, but he had to kill me. He was still trying to figure. This was not a situation. He lived the simplest of life. I'm a world traveler, and this is a guy who just does that very dangerous thing, and every other human being, as far as he's concerned, is an enemy. This was a situation he was still trying to figure out. Of course he had to kill me. I'm an American, and not to mention the fact he's been prepared for death and for killing, and probably has killed people before, and there was no way he could possibly get caught for killing me. This is the middle of a desert that nobody has ever gone through. I mean, There is no way he can get in trouble for killing me. So they say your life flashes before your eyes. I'll tell you what my experience was. My experience was, like, even in words in my head. Well, the first thought was, oh no, it's not a gun. I'm sorry, I failed to mention. Yeah, because I try to even doubt myself. My first thought was, well, of course, all there is up there is stars, or a slight moon. That is the entirety of the light that we have here. And even though it's just a photo, I'm like, no, that's what everyone else would say. Everyone else would jump to, oh my God, you know how dangerous it was a gun. Yeah, that took a split second. And I'm like, no, that's yeah. Let's get over whatever that weird issue is that you need to overly doubt yourself beyond any reason. Yeah, you're about to die. I was in my early 30s. I was 33. And I knew nobody would ever find my body. First of all, actually I did have a thought about my poor family, but then being already at that, not really believing in some kind of afterlife thing, it turns out. I mean, I now know that at the time I didn't really believe in it based on the thoughts that I had. That passed quickly, and I was like, huh. But it doesn't make sense, because there's so much that I still expected and tried out of life and was so close to and whatever, and it doesn't make sense. And then immediately it does make sense. Like I envisioned the obituary, and it made perfect sense. Yeah, it was awesome. I was pleased with it. Not pleased with dying. I'm pleased with the obituary. Live fast, die young, leave a bloody corpse. Boy, had I lived by the age of 33. Boy, had I fuckity lived. A lot more since then, but I'm saying at that moment, my thoughts were, yeah, this makes perfect sense. That I would be left for dead, dying, bleeding out here in the desert, in no man's land. And I was okay with it. I was like, yeah, that's all right. I guess that's how it ends. It's pretty cool to look back on your life that way. Huh. It's pretty cool to know that at 33, I saw that obituary, which I knew would never be written. It was my own head thing, because I knew I wouldn't be found. But I saw that obituary, and this all took place presumably in a second or 10 seconds. I don't know how to define time at that moment. And I was like, yeah, it's okay. That's how it ends. It makes sense. It has been a fair run. It has been a very fair run. I've gotten more out of this life in 33 years than most people get out of life in 100 years. Yeah, felt fair. Anyway, obviously, I gave him my money. Still, I mean, you don't surrender just because you assume you're going to die. If there's any slight chance, as the rabbis said about a few thousand years ago. Even if a sharp sword is resting on the neck of a person, do not give up from the love that life has for you, that God has for you, that reality has for you, that truth has for you. Yeah, obviously I had not given up. It was just, this was how it was going to end. It was pretty clear. But of course you still do what you do, try to. So I gave him all the money, which was literally all the money that I had, a few $100s, gave him all the money in my pocket. A few $100 in Jordan, especially for him, is a huge amount. Although then again, he did have a Range Rover, but in Jordan, for most people, a few $100s is a huge amount. It was in dinars. And then he rammed the Uzi forth at me and said, Kulu! All of it! So I don't know if it was like, Cartman in South Park thinking that Jews have some secret gold hidden somewhere, a gold chain or in a pocket and whatever else, or if he was referring, I realized later, maybe he was referring to the phone that he saw me talking to my friend Steve on priorly. Or maybe he meant the car. I don't know exactly what was going on, because there's no, what, did he think that I had more money in my pocket? Yeah, Kulu. What he's doing there was he's buying for time. He's still trying to figure this thing out, because people generally think that I'm CIA. Generally in life, when I encounter strangers, they think I'm CIA. This guy certainly thought I was CIA. He's still trying to figure out what is what, he's still playing it a little bit. But I knew at that moment that he had no choice but to kill me, because if I would go out as an American, if he would let me live, and I would go out and tell on him, the Jordanian authorities would not be nice to him. There are signs all over Jordan about things paid for by America. Thank you, America. Thank you, America. And the king was just returning from a trip to the States. Yeah, this would be a cause celeb. If I would be allowed to be let go, him and his whole family is done. Dead, really. I'm not saying that the Jordanian government officially, legally would kill them, but things happen. Yeah, dead. He's certainly dead. The rest of his family, one way or another, within a short amount of time, probably dead. He had no choice but to kill me. So he said, Kulu, all of it. This mysterious figure on the other side of the river. I do have feet problems, but thank God I don't have the limp. And I have no idea how that mysterious spiritual story with Jacob ended up turning into this physical commandment to not eat a part of the leg. It's interesting and whatever else. There's a lot to be said about it, obviously, but I'm not going to now. I'm just going to finish my story. So, there's no response to that when a guy shoves an Uzi into your belly saying, give me all of it, after you just gave him a year, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months average salary for the average Jordanian, maybe a year for a lot of people. So I said, wacha dakika, just 1 second. And by the way, Hebrew and Arabic are more or less the same language, different pronunciations. Daka echat in Hebrew. But wacha dakika. As if I'm going back to my car to get the Jew gold. No, I wasn't dressed as a Jew. There was no Jew aspect to this. I'm just saying as a joke. And bear in mind, I had purposely shut the door to my car and turned off the engine to show trust. I find that if you trust people, they trust you. I don't know what to make of this story, but I'm just telling you the facts. I got into the car. I said, and I went quickly back around, opened the front door, quickly turned on the engine, got down on the floor instead of on the seat, pulled down the rear view mirror, started the car without closing the door, and hit the pedal to the metal. He immediately took a shot, and he shot out the front right tire. So there, about, let's say 15, 20, 25 miles out, away from anything at all that anyone has ever traversed. In fact, when I tried to give indications of what it was by saying big, huge things that had been there in the area, when I told the chief of police of that area, he said, no, there's no such thing as there. It doesn't exist. He didn't know. The chief of police. No one's there. And he chased me and he kept shooting and whatever else, and I prepared myself that, like in the TV shows, really I thought of the TV shows, because when else do you end up in situations like this? In TV shows where someone gets shot, but they're still kind of there, and I was like, okay, you're gonna get shot in the belly or whatever, just keep your foot completely to pedal to the metal, no matter what. Yes, you're gonna end up going through the windshield, you'll probably end up being paralyzed for life, Just keep going. You better just be alive. And he chased me up until 3 miles before there was a road. 3 miles before the actual road that people use. That's when I saw in my rear view mirror that he had that he was not right on my tail. Apparently slowed down or whatever. I'm mentioning it because of the Chinese thing with that they were known of all the commandments in the Bible. That's how they were known, as the religion that plucks the sinew, based on that story. And I just seen that being this pretty much almost exactly 13 years since it happened. I asked for wahad dakika. I asked for 1 minute, literally, but colloquially 1 second. And I've been given these 13 extra years so far. I've got no complaints. That's it. So I'll publish this version as is, and I guess I'll publish extended version with all the other information where you can watch me, although I'll speed it up a little bit. Watch me try to figure out, but nah, fuck it. This is a time for not being so serious. This is a time for comedy. This is a time I'm trying to get something serious done in an apathetic generation who's whatever. Yeah.